Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to go beyond the review to talk about the craft, the story, and the meaning of the films we watch today. Tonight, we've got a special Does It Hold Up? From Jim and I's past, but from pretty much everyone's past. A big movie, one could say even a definitive and a culturally defining experience. That, of course, is, if I can find my button here somewhere. Oh, yeah, there we are. Star Wars, the original, the OG. 1977 Star Wars. Of course, folks, it's always entertaining. The film, it's a social nutrition checklist, came in at 25%, which kind of makes sense for a 1977 film. But back to the intro. This, the logline, is, let me read this off to you. Farmboy Luke Skywalker joins forces with an old Jedi Knight, a cocky pilot, a giant Wookiee, and two droids to rescue a princess and save the Rebel Alliance from the evil Galactic Empire's Death Star battle station. Film was, of course, written and directed by George Lucas, stars Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher. Also starring, and this is the original billing, also starring Peter Cushing and Sir Alec Guinness, although he wasn't a sir at the time. Yeah, so that's there's the film in a nutshell. I think it's now time to bring up my co-host with the most, Mr. Jim Chaboyko, and of course, our special guest. We got a special guest this time, everyone. He is going to be helping me on Thursday do a tier ranking of all these films, kind of a ramp up to the new Disney Plus Obi-Wan thing that's coming out on Friday. That thing on that streaming service. Anyway, so yeah, let us welcome, and make sure I unmute them first. Let's give a big welcome to our my co-host and our guest, Cody from the Brockopp Side. Hey, gents, how you doing?
What's up?
Very nice.
He has a weapon. I'm wearing the Rebel approved orange polo, so I hope that's appreciated.
Nice.
Rebel colors.
Very nice. Yes, and I'm in that grayish kind of off sort of white thing that was I'd love to say it is made of linen. So I'd love to say that was on purpose, but it's finally warming up here in Winnipeg. I can finally wear, a short sleeved shirt, a light short sleeved shirt. Anyway, guys, yeah, how's everyone doing? Cody, you good in Las Vegas?
As good as always until it gets to 120 degrees.
Well, but it's a dry heat, isn't it? How about you, Jim?
It's the twin suns that do it in Vegas, I think. Good. Yeah, first really nice spring day today, and it feels like we've turned the corner. It was pretty awesome. So I might have gotten a little bit of color. I don't know if I look pinker than normal, but yeah, all good.
Fantastic.
Start of summer, baby.
Listen, before we jump into the film and everything, first of all, of course, I'll shamelessly beg everyone for a like, a subscription if you haven't already done that, and maybe you could ringy-ding that bell.
Really? I think this is our earliest bell.
Yeah. Oh, we'll be asking again. Rest assured. Sure. This will not be it may be our earliest, but it won't be our only.
Only 17 more times.
Exactly. Well, you'd be like the town crier.
Yeah, exactly.
The Canadians are coming.
Hear ye, hear ye. The Galactic Emperor has declared. Okay, before we get into our movie, it looks like we actually do have a couple of people in the chat, so I thought I'd maybe we should just say hi to those wonderful folks first.
Oh, nice.
We have our good friend from Walt's Flicks Picks. Walt 65 is in the chat a long time ago in a province far, far away. And we also have Richard L. And I'm sure Katie Fowler is somewhere around lurking and will chime in as she feels fit. And then last but certainly not least, let's do this. Let's do this right, everybody.
Nope.
Dragon Movie Guy. Woo! Good to see everyone in the chat. Really, that's awesome. It's going to be a great show tonight. We're going to, folks, for those of you who know what we do and how we do this, we are going to we're going to skip the quick review. The spoiler-free quick review. We're going to assume that everyone has seen this film that's watching it, and if you haven't, I can't help you with that. But what I do, I'm curious, and I had to jump on Jim in our pre-show sound check chat because he asked the same question, but I was like, "Don't ask that question. Don't answer." When did you guys first see this film? Cody, why don't you go first?
That's kind of a tricky one because I have very vague memories of like the original trilogy on VHS being played like at my grandparents' house at a few random times, but I feel like so somewhere mixed in there I definitely had seen it, but I feel like I started to really pay attention to it more towards like, middle and high school when I started getting more into film and started, going into the history of these movies. So it's like a little bit in childhood, a little bit into preteen time, I guess you could say.
Cool. When do you? So it was definitely an at-home experience.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. When was the first time, or have you seen it in the theater?
Oh God, I wish I could have seen this in the theater at this point. It would have been really cool too, just to kind of be in the shoes of everybody in 1977 that, paid money to see it, then, got blown away by watching it in the silver screen. But, yeah, I don't know, maybe someday if they put them back in the theaters for, like, the 50th anniversary in a couple of years or so.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
I got to admit, there's a part of me thinking, you know what, do you four-wall it? Do you just get a bunch of buddies and rent one of the smaller ones in a multiplex just to have that experience again?
That's not a bad idea.
We've got in the this is I do have the link in the description. DMG in the chat says, has anyone seen Cody's new History of Hype for Star Wars? And yeah, great video, and there is a link in the description below. Jim, I'm shouting this out to the chat. First of all, yeah, I'd love to hear everyone in the chat when they first saw this film, their first clear memory of seeing this film. And was it in the theater? Was it a home experience? How did you experience that? Jim, what about you? What was your first?
It's sadly it's similar to Cody's. It just seems to have been there from my childhood. I mean, I was under 10 when it first came out, and I don't know that my mom would have taken me necessarily. I remember it's one of those things that you talk about a lot in class. So it might have been a story that I already knew front to back before I even saw it. We would go home for lunch, watch the cartoon Spider-Man, and the commercials, especially around Christmas time, would be for those Kenner toys of the action figures and things like that. So it sort of seeped in from all ends. If you saved up money, you would like, oh, I'm going to get Chewbacca, or I'm going to get an Imperial droid, or what have you. But I do have distinct memories of seeing Empire Strikes Back at the drive-in, but Star Wars, I was probably a little bit too young to remember actually going to the theater to see it.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Did you?
How about you? Sorry, Corey?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Cody.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but did you actually have any of the original Kenner figures as a kid?
Oh yeah. I remember.
You actually got them. You didn't get like an empty box with an IOU in them, like so many people did.
I might have still have a few around. I think I have a Han Solo, but I remember very tragic story. my mom was calling me in for dinner, and I didn't want to come in because I had set up a Hoth planet. It was winter here, and she was, no, come in now. And I threw Chewbacca, and his arm broke off. And I was like, that's, you know what? That happened like 40 years ago, and it still bugs me. But anyways, yeah, I should have. I let the Force get to me. I guess I don't know. But anyhow. How about you, Rob? When was? Do you recall the first time?
Oh, absolutely. The first in theater experience. I'll set this because Jim, you and I aren't. It's not like I'm 8 years older than you.
No.
But I was 10 years old that summer when it came out. I had already, it was a different time, and parents would say, yeah, here's bus fare, get lost. The first time I saw it, though, was in a downtown theater. I believe it was the North Star.
Oh, okay.
The old North Star downtown, and what's now, what was the North Star Hotel, which had a couple of theaters in it. Later on, though, throughout that summer, so of course it finally gets moved out to the Kings, which was I think what would have been a community theater, kind of a second run theater. Yeah. I lived in the north part of the city. Jim, you'll know this reference, North Kildonan, but it is the further north part of Winnipeg. And the King's Theater is way past Polo Park, a big mall here, which used to be the Polo Grounds. Anyway, way the hell out there. And I remember, and it's supported by other family members. You always, when you're thinking about that far back, how reliable is my memory? But other family members just nagging the shit out of my poor mother to I want to go see a movie. I want to see Star Wars. So that whole summer was my summer of Star Wars. The actual number I saw it in the theater when I was 10 years old, 14 times.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It hit me like, and this is why I'm asking about the theater experience, because even watching it today, just for that, and all I can think is, and Cody, this is why, get some buddies together, go have that experience, because there is nothing like sitting in a dark theater and that opening sequence. Like, I mean, you got the crawl, which is cool, and it's like, ooh, this is a big deal, and I have to read. But then all of a sudden, the counselor's ship, and then the big Star Cruiser thing flying over your head, because you're in the theater like this. Yeah, that the home experience just does not capture how owned you were in that one opening scene. Barely a scene. Barely a sequence. Cody, I get DMG, do a meetup with your fans, with your Vegas fans, go rent a theater, chip in, and just go make it happen. I swear to you, it'll be worth the experience. And if I can figure a way to come down and enjoy it with you guys, I will.
Okay, let's just figure out a date now. But that actually does sound like a good idea. Not gonna lie there.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was my experience, and it was just, it's like like in a way, how could I not? I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
And like me and my brother my oldest younger brother would see a lot of movies anyway. My parents had gone through, they had separated by then. It was, it was a great way to get rid of the kids. Here's some money, just go away. And at a time when, well, if you're back for dinner, you'll be in trouble and you'll miss dinner. A different era, right? So, quickly, let's just take a quick look at the chat and see what people are saying. Walt65 says, the summer of 1977 at the Vogue. Then he drove down to Seattle, DMG's formative years. He was a born and raised Seattlean. Then drove down to Seattle to see it on an even bigger screen. Wow.
Nice.
And then Richard L. Here's an interesting, he actually first saw it on TV. not too long after seeing Return of the Jedi in the theaters. He did see it in the theater in the 90s when they did that reset. What else do we got?
Special editions, yeah.
DMG does remember seeing Empire Strikes Back in Bellingham, Washington when he was 5. Wow, that's an impressive, must have been quite the imprint memory. Yeah, that's super cool. DMG says every May the 4th, the Silverton. I'm assuming, is that a theater in Las Vegas, or is it?
That's a casino.
Okay.
Wait, we said the Silverton?
Oh, that's what. Yeah, the Silverton. Silverton. What did we watch last week? Silverton.
Oh, Silverton Siege.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah. Oh, Seattle. Is that it? I don't know. Anyway, that's very cool. All right, guys. I'll ask one more question before we get into the why of the movie. Why? And this is a yay or nay answer. All the qualifications will come out later. But Jim, does it hold up?
Yes.
Cody.
Yes.
And myself.
Rob,
goddamn right.
Does it hold up?
Yes, it does. Folks in the chat, we're going to get into where we're coming from on this and our usual craft story meaning. But I would love to, if everyone could just chime in on the chat whether or not they think the film still holds up. That would be great. But with that out of the way, I think it's time to talk about. I think it's time to just say the spoiler zone and get into the craft. Cody, why don't you kick us off here? What do you got to say about the craft? The performances, the production design, the sound,
Yeah. Well, this is a movie that while upon multiple rewatches, certain parts of the production design and a little bit of the acting may fall into scrutiny a little bit, but it's one of those movies that I just can't stop learning about no matter how hard I try. Like so many documentaries and books I've read about the making of just this one movie, let alone the rest of the trilogy. It's such an achievement on so many levels with so many things that weren't attempted before or were just barely attempted in the past. I mean, of course you've got people like Harrison Ford, who was not too deep into his acting career at this point. I think he only had one feature credit at that point, which was American Graffiti. And he still brings he does a great performance as this sly, mildly sarcastic smuggler guy, and and Mark Hamill,
a liminal character on the
yeah, and then you got Mark Hamill, who's the face of the movie, the trilogy, the saga, what have you, and again, for somebody that was starting out pretty early on in their career, he does a pretty stellar job at them in this movie. Of course, he starts out kind of in a whiny sort of attitude towards it, but then he grows, but that's part of his arc, so I'm not even going to get to that point, but it's just one of those movies where it's like, this actually got made. That's incredible, regardless of how maybe one shot or two may hold up, but otherwise wow.
Yeah, I dig in what you're putting down there, Cody. The performances from such a I looked it up. Carrie Fisher was 19 going on 20 in that film. Now, of course, she grew up in a showbiz family. So it's, her mother, she had stage experience by then, extensive stage experience, because her mother would involve her in her own shows. Debbie Reynolds would have her up on stage. They'd do duets and shtick and everything. But you think about these young people, and even Harrison Ford, who'd been around, but you're right, Cody, had not had such a big role, like such a career defining one up to this point. They all just totally made these characters. Jim, what do you think? What's your vibe on the performances?
You know, it's one of those things that I sort of appreciate the more the older that I get. I think as
For
a
sure.
kid, you're drawn to the sort of the perpetual older brother that Han is, the cool older brother type. Even though I don't have an older brother, but I think for me as a kid, that was who I was like. This guy's so cool. And it's only in my sort of adulthood I've come to appreciate Carrie Fisher. Just watching her today, even you think, yeah, she's got a nice sharp edge, but it's not all sharp edge. Like she's formidable.
Yes.
And Mark Hamill, who I've come to appreciate as a person on Twitter, still a force of positivity. Mark Hamill's the way he plays him. It sort of reminds me, there's a line in Friends where Joey just says out of the blue one day, I'm thinking of changing my walk. And Chandler kind of looks at him. And in this, if you watch him, Luke Skywalker walks like a kid. Like he's got this little sort of waddle. And he's
in a slouchy sort of rambling to
it.
But at the same time, he's got a good sort of handle on things. You can sort of see that he's trapped in between boyhood and manhood.
Yeah.
And I think that's super well delivered. And as the 2 hours go on, he becomes more formidable. Like he's like, so, one guy calls him boss. He's been a rebel for 45 minutes, and so they find a flight suit in his eyes, whatever. But he's got some authority. Like he sort of knows what he's doing. He knows how to use tech. He says, shut off this, open this door. It's a 7-digit number. He picks up on these things, and the way he portrays them is vulnerable, but coming into his own.
Yeah,
perfect.
No, I think that's
hero's journey.
Yeah, that's just a character journey, like beyond the overall structure of the story. Like he does become a man.
Yes, yeah.
I think is what you're saying.
And this all takes place within, I never counted it. I'm sure other people have. What is it, 72 hours? It's less than a week, right? It's
I don't even think it's a few days. I think it's a day.
It's like Han, how can you betray us? I've known you for 12 hours.
I thought I knew you, man.
Oops, time to save the galaxy.
All the stuff we've been through together in the last 20 minutes.
Okay, now enough ink has been spilled. I don't think we need to get into it. I mean, what a game changer this was in special effects. Although I will say I did, because I'm that kind of keener, I downloaded the 4K 1977 cut, which was a crowdsourced remastering of the original. Like somebody found old work prints
and specialized edition.
No, not the specialized edition. Because there's also I also have the specialized edition, but I watched this 4K 1977 edit, like 24 gigabytes on my hard drive right now. But anyway, moving on. But I will ask you guys this: what did you guys think of the change? And this might be a tough one for you, Cody, but I think you can tell which parts it's like that's not the same.
Mm-hmm. I've seen numerous editions of this movie, so I could definitely compare and contrast.
Well, then, what was your take on those 90s changes? And then, I mean, there's even subsequent changes to that, but
my perspective on the special editions seems to change every couple of years, because when I first saw the special editions, I was kind of just hopping on the bandwagon of, oh, this is weird, why would you do this? But then to some extent, I think some of it's fine, like, building out the world a little bit, adding a couple of digital set extensions, a couple of CG creatures, like, okay, That's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's all stuff that after, the two more movies in the prequels, they might have been a little weird to not see them in there. So it's like, okay, that's fine. But on that note, Han shot first, no question. Uh, but but then going into like the other two movies just real quick, Empire's changes aren't that drastic. It's the least tampered with. The Return of the Jedi with that whole dance sequence, just no.
The dance sequence. Jim, what are your feelings on it now?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, I have to say that Jabba the Hutt is a little bit when Han's
God,
having
I
that
forgot.
discussion with
Yeah.
him, it doesn't look great. Like he's sort of looking past him a little bit.
Han calls him a human being, but he's not a fucking human being. I mean, I know he was a human being in the original shot, but oh, thanks for reminding me
Well,
that.
you know what? My wife pointed that out, and I thought, well, maybe he means it as an insult, and I totally forgot about the original version. Like,
Yeah. It
as
was a
Hutt,
guy.
you make a great human being, but so I thought he was trolling him a bit, but of course it was just one of those overlooked things. Some of it's okay. I think you can tell when you can tell a special effect is a special effect. It sounds sort of an odd sentence to say, but when you can tell it's been changed, I think it takes you out of it a bit. But I tend to not concentrate on those aspects of it. The most egregious is the Jabba the Hutt conversation. I think. Yeah.
And on just one more like minor note there, with the special editions, trying to, give it a little bit of a quote unquote modern makeover for 1997 and all. It makes me question why they didn't go into certain VFX shots, like towards the final battle, where there's some very obvious clear boxes around some of the ships and stuff. That could have definitely benefited from a little, eraser tool and After Effects work going on there. So it kind of seems like they maybe focused on a couple of the wrong things there, but that's just me.
You know what, for myself, guys, that's a great point, Cody. I'm wondering if some of that, because that was done in the 90s, when you saw it in the theater, it was still on film. They had Lucas was only doing test screening, digital screenings. If it came out, like, still a lot of people were watching it on VHS, even like 4:3, their editions. There we go. The one thing I'm gonna now slightly praise. One of the things that was always tough, and I could never quite see it in the, like, I remember as a kid it bugging me because you couldn't quite tell when first act of the movie we finally meet Luke and the droids are in his like the garage, oil bath, see the hologram in this, because they redid some of the mats. You could see the ship that he's got, the little model, and you can see the matte painting, or at least the construction of the bigger ship like that. And that was so important to set him up as a pilot so that later you're not going, wow, he's remarkably good in that fighter jet.
You actually see the ship he was like, firing womp rats with and stuff.
Exactly. But you couldn't see it. If you look deeper in that scene past them, you can actually say, okay, that's where it is. And we're seeing a model, because of course it's a matte painting or they built part of it because they only had so much money, whatever. It was just like, oh, I can now see that.
Wow.
But the other stuff, it's still, I can't say it's cringy. That's too much, but there's a part of me that's still kind of like, did you have to? And adding a scene in kind of shows how unnecessary that scene was. With Jabba the Hutt, it's like it had no impact on the narrative. I don't think you're like, well, thank God now certain things make sense, or it was stumbled there in the original cut, and now we got this connector scene. No, we didn't need that. Okay, so guys, I think it is going to quickly, let's take a quick look at what's going on in the chat. They've been pretty active. It's as though they had opinions on this film. Who knew that people would have opinions about Star Wars?
What?
Okay. Oh, it's just, you know what? They're having their own party in there.
As usual.
Yeah. Walt 65 is definitely on the Jabba was not good in this. DMG, the Blue Harvest attack on the Death Star holds up better than the special edition CGI X-Wings. Referring, DMG, of course, referring to, what's his name? Seth MacFarlane's, The Family Guy, comedy cuts. Which are well worth watching. Like, I mean,
those are hilarious.
Yeah, Walt 65 agrees. The Jabba scene slowed the narrative. What else do we got here? Otherwise, Mark Hamill is in the pilot episode of 8 is now playing the Grant Goodeve character.
What? I didn't know that.
8 is enough. I remember that.
Wow.
I don't remember the pilot. Well, it's good to know, DMG. Thanks, man. All right.
And I think he was roommates with Freddy Krueger when he got cast as Luke Skywalker, so that's pretty cool.
Apparently, like, the guy put him up. Like, you know, he was like, they were all part of the young actor scene. It's crazy, right?
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move forward now. Get out of craft and let's talk about the story. Jim, why don't you kick us off here? Tell us what you think about the story. Tell us about the weaknesses in this.
Well, first of all, I mean, we sort of discussed that it's one of those things that are sometimes really fun movies that take place in a really limited amount of time. Like they're just, off to the races and nothing is spared. And when we were talking about The Matrix, it was sort of like that too. Like it just moved. It had a momentum of its own. There was no side quests. They did one thing, in The Matrix, they did one thing, but that led to an ambush. That led to other stuff happening. So everything just sort of, it's all momentum. And they just do one. You almost have to watch it carefully to think, oh, okay, why are they doing this again? Because you're just along for the ride.
Yeah.
They did pull away, and this is a choice. It could have been a much darker movie. Luke comes across the remaining members of his family as burning skeletons. That's chilling. And the whole and it struck me today as they're driving to Alderaan, there's just a bunch of rocks there. That's horrifying. It's such a horrifying moment. And then at the end, they basically lose 90% of their Air Force, for lack of a Space Force, for lack of a better term. And there's never it's like, yay, we won the battle. So there's choices that they make here not to dwell on the sort of the crappy aspects of it.
The cost of war.
The cost of war, and the whole planet thing is just like crazy. But like destroying Alderaan, when you think about it, is kind of a massive dick move. But
Darth Vader, that wasn't very nice.
Yeah, exactly. But
no, I imagine Jim like kind of dick move, dude.
Yeah. What? Come on.
This Vader guy's a dick.
But and they could have slowed down and dealt well. And another thing that I'm glad they avoided, Luke obviously would have killed his first guy here, first enemy here. Huh. And there's never any kind of like, oh, I just killed my first person, and I know different movies handle different things differently, but there was none of that kind of like, oh, which typically slows down everything. This is all about momentum, and it's all about getting the characters from point A to point B and having their sort of swashbuckling time. But it could have gone in another direction, and I'm glad they didn't. It sort of kept the spirit of it true. And it's it's not for 40-year-old adults. Like, this is obviously maybe not a kids movie, but maybe an adolescence movie or something for kids.
You know what? I gotta disagree with that. But first, I wanted to talk about.
Like, it's not Solaris,
No, it's not a thinky. It's not thinky. That's so pejorative. I think it is a big tent, children of all ages. They didn't make that much money on adolescents. like
Yeah,
which
yeah.
for
That's true, yeah.
decades.
Not for a couple
Decades
decades at least.
after adjusting for inflation was the biggest seller since Gone with the Wind. For
Yeah,
decades it owned that, and that's because it was I think what we kind of get caught on is because it doesn't do that Solaris deep dive into existential dread. It's considered lesser. It's considered for children. And I'd argue, though, that it's so mythic and it's such a great example of the craft. You don't know what it's doing, even though by the end of it, you are transformed, emotionally transformed. That said, I wanted to go back to a couple of things. Walt 65, our friend from Walt Flickspix, he mentioned in a couple of emails back and forth, he made a great point about Sir Alec Guinness. Some of the taken out of context, and I know this is what Walt was doing, but yeah, there's like some lines where it's like, what are you talking about? Only stormtroopers are this precise. But it's only ridiculous later in the movie where you go, well, they don't seem to be that good a shot.
No.
Except when they're shooting against the Rebel Alliance in the first scene. And I only really kind of noticed that where it's like, yeah, they maybe shoot 2 stormtroopers and every Rebel Alliance defender is like just, and they had the advantage, perhaps not the high ground, but they had the advantage. These guys have to go through this little hatch. Yet they lose quickly.
How do we defend?
And so it's one of those things. But I think going back to what you're saying is, and why I think this film is almost like it's in that same pantheon as The Matrix is, a perfect movie, and its narrative. Each scene is accomplishing several things. It's revealing character, it's exploring the theme, and it's moving the plot forward. Every scene. There is no scene, except for the one that got cut and didn't need to be reinserted. We didn't need anything else. Everything does that. You get a couple little breathers, but even then we learn information that, again, moves the plot forward. And what I think with these lines that look ridiculous later in the movie, because they do, the filmmakers knew it's like, but it'll be right for this scene, and that's all we care about. We care about the scene, which will get us to the next scene. And because it owns us so well psychologically and emotionally, where you never have a chance to go, wait a sec, I remember in scene 2, and I believe the time code was this. They're unlike the 5 Bloods. There is never an opportunity to go, wonder how much that gold weighs. Yeah. Well, while I'm barely watching this terrible film, I'll look that up. This film doesn't give you that opportunity. So they kind of go, well, am I going to worry? I'm not going to be so wrapped up in continuity that I'm going to miss the boat on what's actually important. Owning the audience and forever delivering them to the next scene until you get an emotional and psychological payoff that I think is in many respects one of the makes it one of the greatest films, one of the greatest stories, film stories ever. You know, the way it lands, it sticks that fucking landing because every scene knew what it needed to do to get you to the next scene, to build that conflict, you know, a denouement that is like almost like everything's almost fucking perfect from a filmed story perspective.
One more thing about story and character before we move on. I just wanted to.
Well, I wouldn't mind getting Cody's take on this.
Oh, sure. I just wanted to put in before I forget. When we looked at the Matrix, we were talking about Neo, the character, as he's written, so part of the story. How he's open to everyone. He's an open book. He talks with everyone. He doesn't shut anybody down. He even Cypher. And in this case, I think I found Luke to be much the same way. He's pleasant to everyone. He listens to everyone. He's sort of that positive. Like he's nice to the droids. He's nice to the old man from the other side of the planet. You know,
gets a save the cat moment right at the beginning where he says, "No, just Luke." All right, Sir Luke. No, just Luke. Like you have this little moment of, he's not a dick. He's even being nice to the droids.
Yeah, and that sort of carries through. Like he's sort of open. I don't know how else to explain it, but he's engaged. He's not crappy to anybody. He doesn't lose his temper. He's just like, tell me more. You know, and I think that's kind of an interesting point.
Yeah. Well,
sorry.
No, that makes total sense. Cody, what? Tell us what you thought of the story.
Well, I guess the big thing that
Jim
comes
and I left you so much to say.
Well, you guys talked a lot about the themes and,
Oh, we still got to get into the meaning.
Yeah. Yeah, you delved into a bit of the psychology of the characters and the importance of every scene. But I guess the thing that always comes to mind whenever I rewatch this movie, at least for the last several years or so, is just how it's a prime example of the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell, I believe. Because it really hits every single beat with so many familiar archetypes that, even though it's this crazy fantasy world, you still can understand these characters and you'd relate to them because they are things we've seen before, like Luke Skywalker being this ordinary kid on this planet who, is in the middle of growing up still, but he aspires to do more and do better. Then you've got the call to action with the droids and Princess Leia's message, and then the wise and helpful mentor with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Then the whole point of no return or crossing the first threshold, whatever the term is technically called. When he decides not to wallow in his own self-pity and be like, oh, woe is me, my family's gone. It's like, nope, I'm gonna go be a Jedi now and save the galaxy. See you later.
Well, so that's the point of no return. Like he refuses the call and then he accepts the call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just that many classic storytelling elements in there, I think, are just what make it work so well, because I think there's been a few science fiction and fantasy movies that don't adhere to that enough, and there's just not a whole lot to, grab onto when you watch it, and it's just having that very classic structure. Some criticize it, but I don't think it's valid. Just having that simple structure that's easy to follow, but it still feels fresh when it's done right in a movie like this or like in the first Harry Potter. But it's something it's one of those movies that if you take like a mythology folklore class in high school or college, you're going to watch this movie because it's a perfect example. And once you kind of can grasp onto all that, the giant space battles and the exploding space stations and weird frog people, it's all more acceptable because you have those core elements there.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more, Cody. And like Campbell is quoted actually in his interview series with is it Dan Moyer? Well, excuse me, Phil. American, they did a series on the power of myth.
Bill Moyers?
For peace. Thank you, Jim. Yes. And you see Campbell saying, George Lucas was my best student. Even though he wasn't like literally a student in his class, Joseph Campbell got a lot of phone calls from George Lucas. What do you think of this? What about this? Does this make sense? The hero's journey is so cooked into the story foundation. You kind of have to talk about it. And what's impressive is that you see a lot of the hero's journey isn't the only way to tell a story. It's very much a warrior journey. That said, one of the great things about the hero's journey and this film is at no time does it feel paint by numbers. Like it's in the foundation, like it's in the structure, but not in the, and now we will have the herald. Da 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 da, I am the herald. Will you accept this call to adventure that, Rick and Morty do such a good job of parodying? I will not answer a literal call to adventure. That's a great point, Cody. And I strongly recommend, if you haven't read it, it is such a big part of American big part of a big chunk of American films.
Yeah.
To read the book is well worth it. I recommend it to anyone. All right, guys. Let's I want to take a quick gander at the chat before we move on to meaning. But I also think that this is it's a wonderful opportunity to once again beg for a like. And if you haven't already, especially as we mentioned before, Cody, what are we looking forward to this Thursday again?
Well, we just maybe doing a tier list showdown of every Star Wars movie. My ranking, your ranking. Gonna see who
We'll go back
who's got
and
the
forth.
correct get the correct order there.
Who has the high ground? Yeah. So you want to subscribe? We are doing a Thursday. That's May 26th, Thursday evening.
Yeah.
Time TBD. We will get back to you guys on that. But if you haven't already, subscribe. And of course, what do you got to do? You got to, where's our town crier? I got to ringy-ding that bell.
Is that a call to action?
Help me, Chim Jaboyko. You're my only hope.
That's what this is for.
All right. In the chat, oh my goodness, it's an active one. Walt and DMD are definitely digging in on this. You know what? I'm going to ask the guys, you know what? If they want us to comment on some of the things, yeah, these guys are just keep going back and forth. But here's just one good point. Walt says, good job, Rob. Yet George was so clunky by episode 1. You know what? Walt would love to see on Thursday night. I suspect that may come up as we go through the tier ranking. DMG says, George Lucas said moment, scene, movie. If a take doesn't serve all three, then it has to go. But there's a lot of other stuff. Is there anyone, if you guys want us to comment on something you guys are going back and forth on, please at me. So at, the little at symbol, Rob Christensen, and I'll actually highlight it in the chat and I'll make sure I bring up that comment. All right, gentlemen, we are making good time. We may actually finish on the hour. Let's get into let's get out of the story and into the meaning. Guys, do you mind if I kick off this part?
Absolutely. Go ahead. You got words, yeah.
I do have words, many, many words.
Rob, you must start with the meaning. You'd like to start. You'd like to begin the conversation.
These aren't the themes you're looking for.
Oh! What I wanted to it's interesting. This film, according to even Lucas himself, he was trying to make an analogy. Of course, he wrote it in the 70s, in the early 70s, even the idea and notes and everything. Thing was shot in 76. Of course, what was the big thing going on in American culture at the time? You had the counterculture movement, but you had Vietnam. And the way he saw this apparently was the big technological empire, the big evil was the United States in Vietnam. The ones who would roll in with all the gizmos and all the bombs and all this stuff. And just a pin in it for you guys. I think that is, I get how I get that he felt that way, but I gotta admit, I'm like, yeah, you do not see that in this film at all. I'm like, that's a stretch to see it in this film. It's only because he said it. And I wanted
more World War II more than anything, but yeah.
Well, it was so poorly done, maybe. Or it just got ditched at some point, making it obvious that it becomes really easy to kind of go, well, that's Hitler, or whatever your boogeyman, your personal, the one you have the personal kind of, because you're absolutely right, Cody. He uses the word alliance, the Allies.
The shape of Darth Vader's helmet, the back, very German-esque.
Well, look at the stormtroopers, and where do we get that word from? Sturmtrooper, the World War I
And
German
the whole
army.
yeah.
Like it's
and the whole raging fascism thing going on too. So
I don't think
And
we
the
actually see
efficiency.
enough about.
Yeah.
But that does lead to another big, I think, a clearer theme in this film was the and something that Lucas you see in all his films, this kind of conflict between the, let's say, the robotic or stripped of any humanity technological power versus a more holistic human level resistance. And I think that is one of the subtexts in the film that's a little easier to get. It's don't trust the flying computer, even though, I mean, you're all out in space and machines and computers everywhere. Yeah, this is the way you ditch that. But you see that trust the force, kind of a whole Zen Buddhist thing going on there. I think that is like something super clear in this film that isn't necessarily a must-have in the hero's journey. There's a million ways you can fill in those tropes in those storytelling beats. You don't have it isn't necessarily an argument for a Buddhist worldview, an Eastern worldview, and that certainly seems, I think, fitting. That 70s LA kind of vibe. That, and if you ask Carrie Fisher, a lot of coke. But yeah, beyond that, I don't actually. It is harder to find anything beyond that. In some ways, it doesn't have a lot of meta textual stuff going on, in part because it's so clearly so reduced, so intense, so the quintessence of a hero's journey. And yeah, you know what? The big empire is bad, like all these, like so many of these kind of stories are. And you need a nobody, perhaps a nobody of noble blood. Because there's even in the first movie, there's that, well, your father was strong in the Force. He was a great pilot. So there's a little bit of that chosen one. We only really see more of that later. But yeah, I think like beyond that technological thing, yeah, I don't think there's much more meaning in it. What do you? We got a couple of comments. I will rest assured, Walt, we will bring those up. But what do you guys think? Cody, why don't you go first?
Yeah,
Feel free to say I'm full of crap.
No, I think you described it pretty damn well. I mean, this movie, I think, for lack of a better term, is very much, I think, it can be very seen as like a very dystopian fiction, because you've got this giant powering government controlling everything, and most people are just pretty, in their ways, saying, oh yeah, hail emperor, basically, and they don't question anything. Then there's this group of rebels who are like, no, these guys they're the bad guy, but they're gonna make us
They're
look
fighting
like the
for
bad guy
freedom.
rising.
Freedom.
Yeah, and I think some people over the years probably looked at this movie and thought, this is an example of why you probably shouldn't trust the government, just generally speaking. Not gonna get into any real world examples, but yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about sometimes, but I do think, Rob, you pretty much nailed it with what you said there.
Jim, you have anything you want to add to this before we go to the comments?
I think it sort of advocates, the part of the thing that Luke does is that in this very short time frame, he's open to the Force. He's open to being trained. He's open. At one point, Obi-Wan actually says to him, "Stretch out with your feelings." Sorry, I made him sound like a beetle. But anyway, but so I think
all
part
of a sudden I
this
see
too-
the yellow submarine as part of the fighting force.
I've
I've
would
been
be an
hit.
addition
I'm
that I would
going
dig.
down.
So I think part of it too, whether this is a character note or more sort of along the lines of more of a theme, is that the character in this case that opens him up to this, opens himself up to new things, aka the Force, is the one who's successful. Like he ditches the shooting computer, and he sort of just is doing it by feel, and
whereas Darth Vader literally is a human being who needs technology to keep him alive.
Yeah. It's funny if you watch the old web series Chad Vader. He says, "What happened to you anyway?" He goes, "My mountain bike fell into a volcano." But anyway, So I think the underlying thing here is that the learner who's more open to accepting ideas is maybe the one who's going to be more successful. Something about that in there, availing yourself to learning, basically. The act of being a pupil, perhaps. I'm not sure exactly how to word it here, but
I think it can add to that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It made me think of one of the key lines, almost like a thematic statement, you could say, is that you've taken your first step into a larger world. And if there's another theme, and we've touched on it, certainly part of his arc, just becoming a man. But you could say that in a lot of ways, if there's another theme here, it's about how a youth can become an adult, and to realize, to get off the farm, that kind of closed, safe space where the outside world, and you see it the way Uncle Owen, it's like, keep the child safe, keep him home. I know he doesn't like it, but the world out there is big and dangerous. And then all of a sudden he's forced, like we all are, forced eventually to interact with the larger life. And how do we choose to interact with it? And I think that's what you're saying, Jim, and some of what you were talking about earlier, Cody. That's getting me to think like this. Why don't we've got a few comments in the chat they're directing at us. Let's take a look. First of all, Walt refers to the Nazi gear. They're all like, you're absolutely right. I think Cody, you, Jim, both referred to this. It's that 30s fascism as a style choice. Fascism by Coco Chanel. He goes on. He says, for all the fun of the film, given my Uk connections, Walt, of course, is a Ukrainian Canadian, as our co-host is. Given with a name like Cheboyko, what would one expect?
Flag.
The destruction of Alderaan was much harder to take this time. Well, and it is interesting how a film can accept other. Going back to that Vietnam thing, but you're talking about World War II and how a film can accept other, let's say, context interpretations over time, which I think is a strength of this movie, not a weakness. DMG says, Star Wars was created by men. A giant ball in outer space can blow up everything, but the one woman in existence doesn't wear bras because they haven't been invented. DMG makes an interesting point here. Just in definitely a movie of the 70s. Like, Bechdel test, what? Okay, we do see another, I think the president of the Alliance, whatever, she's a woman, but we never actually see them. Thank you.
And Beru.
Yeah, but she died.
Yeah. Well, and we never see them talking to other women. DMG then says, imagine if Alec Guinness had the Beatles' Liverpool lilt to his accent. Oh, good grief. All right, on that note, here, why don't we, Jim, I think it's time for you to tell us what we're going to be watching next week.
Oh, yes. I always forget the title here, but we're going
This is
Yeah.
next Sunday, of course.
Next Sunday.
Yeah.
Going back to Europe for us, and we're going to take a look at a little Mads Mikkelsen movie called Riders of Justice, which came out a couple of years ago, and I believe is available on Crave, unless I'm mistaken. I might put a comment in afterwards, but yeah, it's out there, and Mads is back for us. In any case,
Yes. Of course, the last time we reviewed a film with him in it
Another
would have
round.
been Another Round, a slightly different take on life
yeah,
from this
yes,
one. Bunch
Yeah,
of middle-class Danish teachers do a work drink experiment. What do you mean my family's falling apart? As they try to drink more during the day. Okay, let's. Cody, do you want to tell us once more and let everyone know what you and I are doing Thursday evening?
Yeah, well, Thursday we're going to be doing another live stream, but we're not going to be discussing one Star Wars movie. We're going to discuss all of them. But we're not just going to discuss all of them, we're going to put them into a tier list as to which ones are good and not so good and better and worse than the others. And then we're going to be like, I disagree with you a little bit, but that's okay. And then people will probably chime in as well. And it's going to be a fun time. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, come to Disney Plus this Friday, May
Absolutely.
27th. Download it now.
We'll be from the lowest of there's just too much fucking sand here
It's coarse and rough
to,
and
of course, what is
irritating.
our top tier again?
The high ground.
Which film, or perhaps films, from the Star Wars series of films has the high ground? Of course, we are talking the major theatrical releases, the live-action theatrical releases. So for those of you who are kind of going, but what about those Ewok movies from the early 80s that ended up on TV?
That shit don't count, yo.
Yeah, they will not be tier ranked, because that would mean I'd have to watch them, and I don't want to do that.
And
I
we're
don't
not
think
talking about the shows either, because that's a whole nother rabbit hole to dive
Yeah.
into, although
Yeah.
I do have opinions on those.
Oh, and
And
worthy. Like I was like, how can we get the Mandalorian in here?
and I'll try to tune in. I won't be there, but I'm stuck at work. But in my strange castle. But I'll try to see if I can.
Speaking of the Death
yeah,
Star,
tune in.
depending
so
on
Death
who's
Star.
running the operation at the time.
No comment. I'm politically nonpartisan.
Absolutely. I, on the other hand, am not, and have no problem sharing my opinion. All right, gents, let's before we get into final thoughts, I think it is worth. I know we all said it holds up, but we always get into whether or not we're going to give the director, George Lucas, a pass or a fail on this little indie film. Jim.
Yeah, pass. Give me A+.
Cody.
Yeah, pass. You kidding me?
Well, that's 3 A+ from the team here. You know what, guys? I think we've covered a lot of ground here, but what is fascinating about Star Wars, and I know, especially on the meaning stuff, I'm going to come up with more stuff 10 minutes from now. But do you guys have any, it is rich ground, and it does make me want to read the hero's journey again. Now I'm all cranked up on that. But Cody, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I guess kind of circling back to what I said towards the beginning of the stream, how this movie is just such an intriguing movie to learn about the making of it from start to finish. You know, I feel like a lot of people will take for granted that Star Wars, there was a time it didn't exist, and visual effects and special effects of this variety did not exist.
Yeah.
But guess what? 1977 comes around and boom, here it is. And we would be in a... Who knows where special effects would be right now if it wasn't for these movies. You know, somebody may have come around and did something, but I feel like, and not just on the technical side of things, but you know, Star Wars is the first movie itself was just a major landmark in so many ways, whether it be, blockbuster storytelling that can also turn into a truckload of
The
merchandising.
used future.
Yeah.
That idea of a dirty used future. Up to that point,
Yeah,
science fiction films were all about clean, white, streamlined.
shiny. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, just I think it should be a really good example of just if you have a crazy ambitious idea for a film and you're not sure how to pull it off, and if you know what you're doing and you have problem solving abilities, you could absolutely pull it off and you could create one of the biggest franchises in history, if not the biggest one.
Yeah.
So it's the movie's just an achievement by every stretch of the imagination, whether or not you want to nitpick one thing or another. It's here, it's wow, it's Star Wars.
It's a cultural watershed for, let's
Mhm.
say, a Western cultural watershed moment. Jim, you got anything else you want to add to that?
I do. Quick lightning round. Darth Vader. Darth Vader, dress for the job you want. The If you watch it with subtitles, hats off to the Disney subtitle crew, because I actually heard C-3PO, or I saw him say "thank the maker," which is
Yeah,
opens
when
up
he's
a
going
whole
into the
can of worms.
yeah,
The other thing too is, and I got this new insight from the subtitle crew. At one point, R2D2 says, "Beep bloop borp." I swear to God. And Chewie says, "Arg garg." So they didn't do. They did a phonetic subtitle. They didn't do the inherent meaning in what they were saying. But it was kind of funny. We were laughing at that.
To be fair, they had real dialogue in the screenplay. They just turned to and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Somebody once did an AC/DC cover, record cover. It was R2D2, "Dirty Deeds Bleep Bloop Lorp," which is still one of my favorite ones. But great music, production values, insane, look great. Everybody obviously bought in. If you had one person that didn't buy into it, as
it's stupid.
as much as Alec Guinness may have rolled his eyes at some point, allegedly, if you didn't have one of those people, if they didn't buy into it, I don't think you'd have the same thing. But they all obviously did to some extent. Yeah.
Well, I think
Cushing,
that was part of our conversation with Walt in emails earlier. That's something that Walt and I agreed on is, even though Guinness in his letters, because a man of an era where you wrote letters to friends,
Mhm.
at a time in the mid 70s where it's even a phone call was still kind of pricey. He thought it was ridiculous. It's interesting to see a man in his 60s bitch about all the kids who are also, treating him like he's a delicate flower and, bitching about, I don't know, I'm old, but not in my 80s, damn it. But
Yeah.
I want to, yeah, we could have talked about so much more. I think this is what's
Yeah.
remarkable about this film. You're right. Until Jim mentioned it, the soundtrack. That was a thing. And every scene has a great kind of emotional or a pacing beat to it that's like, and at times you're like, I gotta stop looking so I can just hear it. It isn't just in the big moments, it's in the smaller moments, everything. Cody, you're right. Like the look of the thing. Would we have had Blade Runner without this film? Alien without this film? That again, that used
Good question,
that like that kind of dirty almost working class. This is not a class conscious film. It's just something entirely different. But I don't think those other films would have happened without this. Even, and this has been talked about, Walt says, I'm sure he, instead of Gordy, means Cody. He says, on Gord's point, a lot has been discussed about if Star Wars ruined films by being one of those first blockbusters. And I think you know what? There's a good argument to be made there, Walt, but you also have to include Jaws, which came out a
Yes,
couple
yeah.
of years earlier. Yeah, you had
Film
this
that grows over
crazy.
100 million worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, I think what you guys are saying is totally on point. Walt, he bought the double album as soon as it came out. Shit, I remember that.
Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise. Now I'm getting a bit of a tingle. He also said, for the man who gave us Red Tails, I'll pass. Richard L. seems to be a little disappointed that we, Cody, are not going to include the Star Wars Holiday Special in our tier list.
B. Arthur deserves some analysis.
Walt talks about Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah, you know what? These guys wouldn't have had the credibility to make all those 80s defining films. All right. I think we've got it all covered, gents. Again, I want to thank everyone in the chat. You know what? Walt, thank you so much for coming. DMG, thank you very much, Dragon Movie Guy. Richard L, I'm sure KDF is somewhere, Katie Fowler's somewhere in the background there. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks so much for making such a great chat and contributing to our conversation. And of course, I want to say to everyone, if you haven't already, go subscribe to Cody's channel. There's a link to his channel in the description. And go check out, as you're gearing up for our combo stream, which will be out on both our channels at the same time. Go see Cody's The Time When Star Wars Was Overhyped video. Great video. Yeah, Cody, where else can people find you on the interwebs?
Well, aside from my YouTube channel, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and that's about it. Just look up the Brockopp Side. You'll find me. I also have a TikTok that I'm posting on a little bit more frequently, but just type in the Brockopp Side on Twitter and Instagram, and it's the best place to find me outside of YouTube.
The Brockopp Side, everyone. Brockopp spelled Brockopp. Brockopp. All right. Again, thanks everybody. Thursday time TBD for that live stream. And then, of course, Jim and I will be back at our usual time, 9:45 p.m., Sunday the 29th.
9th, yeah.
Yeah, the 29th, 9:45 p.m. Central Daylight Time, coordinated to Universal Time -5 for, what was it again? Raiders of Justice?
Riders of Justice.
I don't know. Justice was involved, and an R word.
Raiders, something.
A solid 2-syllable R word. All right. Well, yeah, I think that's our cue to
Wednesday. One last thing. Wednesday is the 45th anniversary of the release of Star Wars. So this Wednesday, May 25th. I meant to bring that up earlier. So
crazy.
Happy birthday, Star Wars.
Yeah, 45 years since its first 45-year-old film.
Yes.
Like crazy. Defining.
Wow.
All right, everybody. Let's all wave goodbye now. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Luke. May the Force be with you.